Bet there's tons of people dying to come in and listen.
Oh, yeah. Because it's so exciting.
What's exciting is the last work session.
Yeah, I was going to say that is exciting. So yeah, this is our official last work session. Now, if we don't wrap it up today, we'll have to carry it forward. And of course, we still have to go through the formal amendment review and discussion. So it's not like you're not looking at this stuff again. But with regards to work sessions, this is our official last one. Work session 11. I'm going to grab a pencil. Open the meeting. Do we want to start, or we want to wait for Chris, or what do you think?
No, we can start.
Okay, let's start.
Okay. Calling to order the Planning Commission special business meeting on October 27th, 2020 at 5:02 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mr. Clapper?
Present.
Mr. Payno?
Here.
Mr. Bruder?
Present.
Ms. Edwards?
Present.
And Chris is missing, so.
Is there a motion to excuse Mr. Christopher Clevenger Morris?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Can I have some clarification on who seconded that? I apologize.
I did.
Thank you.
Okay. Hearing none, motion carries 4-0. And then today is just a zoning update work session number 11 under new business. We are reviewing the zoning code text amendments for proposed chapter 1106. Ms. Brown?
So you will notice you got several things in your packet. One of them was the main chapter. And then you would have gotten something that said chapter 1101, because anytime we cut and pasted it, it messed up all the numbers. But Eric rewrote the sexually oriented uses and businesses. And then you would have gotten a sheet that had the items that are on our chart that didn't make it actually into this chapter. So I would say to start the beginning, we should look at what Eric wrote and see if everybody's okay with that. He basically took everything and whittled it down to just say uses and businesses and took a lot of wording out. Did anybody have any questions, or do you want to explain anything, Eric?
I think that's a pretty accurate summary. I think that it's not exactly a pressing problem with the city of Kent, but we still need to have language addressing these issues. And a couple of things went more into regulations instead of definitions. So there's a few things we took out from the definition section, but are now in the regulation section.
And Eric still needs to write a statement about prohibiting obscene language for the sign chapter. So when we come back with the stricken and the clean draft, you'll see that language will be added. And in addition, we did catch that on the chart, this included it in the ICR. We do not think that's a good idea. So we have taken that, we're going to take that out of the chart, and sexually oriented uses and businesses will only be allowed in the industrial. Correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Unless you guys tell us we're wrong.
Unless you want it in the ICR. I'm just thinking West Main next to Claiborne is probably not where we would want this type of a use.
Yeah, I would say the thoroughfare plan wasn't hoping for this use to be there.
I would agree. Well, when we realized it, we were like, oh my gosh, that would probably not, if we had missed that, that could have been troublesome. So luckily we caught that.
Yeah, just so everybody, I mean, the Carter lumber site is in the I industrial. So if somebody wants to convert that right across the street from all those houses, that would be permitted.
Is that the I?
Yeah.
It is.
Carter lumber site is I, yeah.
We will, it's conditionally permitted, so we can't limit it to certain eyes and not other eyes, unfortunately. It does have some, where I believe, let me see here, there was something that, it can't be within 500 feet of any R1, R2, R3, R3A, R4, or RC district or any residential use, whether in the city of Kent or in surrounding cities or townships, or within 500 feet of any school, church, daycare center, park, or library. So the Carter lumber at least likely would not meet some of those, but we did try to make it as restrictive as possible. We could always increase that to 1,000 feet and really make it restrictive, which then should definitely cover the Carter lumber. We actually did that with the number 5, a sexually oriented business or use must not be established within 1,000 feet of any other sexually oriented business or use. And that was to prohibit the formation of like a red district, so to speak, like they have in Amsterdam. So we could always change that if you guys think that we should make that 1,000 feet.
Or any other restriction you want,
Yes,
since it is a special use.
yes, exactly. It's a special use, so you really have the ability to put restrictions on this to really limit its presence in the community.
Well, can you limit an activity, so to speak, totally from your zoning code or from your city through your zoning code? Or is somebody going to come and sue you for that?
I have always said that if you prohibit something everywhere, then you're basically allowing it everywhere. So we try to be that's why we try to allow it, but then be very restrictive about how we allow it.
Because
Okay.
if they take it to court and get it flipped, that they can have it, they can then pick which zoning
So
district they
it's
would like.
safer to have it in the code, but have it very restrictive. Okay, I'll buy that. I'm just asking.
Hey,
Good question.
Bridget, Christopher just emailed and said that he
Oh,
needs.
I see him. I'm sorry. I apologize. I see him.
Okay.
Yes. I was looking at my papers and I did not see him in the waiting room.
Hi, Chris.
Hello.
Hi, Chris. Sorry, I was looking at my papers. I didn't notice you sitting in the waiting room there.
You're fine.
We're just starting to review the proposed update that Eric wrote for, it came out on in your attachments as chapter 1101, because whenever we make edits, it renumbers it, but it's actually for the standards applicable to specific land uses for sexually oriented uses and businesses.
Okay.
And we were just discussing that right now, it's only going to be allowed in the I, and because it was listed as in the ICR, but we do not think that's a wise decision. And then we were just discussing that the Carter lumber site is there, and you know, should we increase? If you look at, I just had it. I was looking at it. That's why I didn't see you. Where we have on the final page, item 4 talks about they cannot be established within 500 feet of R1, R2, R3. We were just discussing, should we increase that to ensure that it doesn't create an issue over by the Carter lumber site? We can make it any, like, really anything, 1,000 like the other ones
I
or
feel
more.
like we should increase it. Carter lumber area is kind of, that's heavily residential. So I think that would be scary. And up on Newcomer, there's like a little residential square as well.
Okay, what do you
with
think?
Industrial.
Want to make it 1,000 or you think more?
I'm horrible with distance.
500 feet at the Carter lumber, I mean, as long as the street, I mean, there's houses right across the street across that little side street just to the east of Carter Lumber. I mean,
Right.
it's well within 500 feet. That's within
Is that Orchard?
60, 70 feet, 80 feet.
Gar-
And then across the street on a little diagonal, that's well within 500 feet to that neighborhood. Now, the one out on Fairchild, which is the next to the whatever the landscape place
Turf
out there.
trimmers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
turf
not
trimmers.
sure. Well, that's across the street from a church.
Yeah. So that 500 feet would probably be met by the church. We could make it
Absolutely.
1,000 just to be safe if you wanted to. It's up to you.
But they
Well,
built
the
some at
other
the end
the
of-
other industrial properties in Kent are the
Long Lake.
Davy Drill, and that's all adjacent to a number of different residential areas. It's contiguous. So
Jen
that's
brought up a good point, though, because if they build at the end of Quay, which is where Turf Trimmers is, you know how the street goes down further?
okay.
It wouldn't be within 500 feet of the church potentially, although it might be up against Silver Meadows. You might want to add some here just to give yourself maybe even 750. Or you can make it 1,000, just like the number 5.
What's the standard in other cities?
Not sure.
I don't think there is a standard in other cities. It's very much, I have not seen anything more than 1,000. I can say that.
Let's just do 1,000 and it should be good.
I'm good with that.
So both those 500.
Yeah, we'll make those. So number 4 and number 5 will both have the requirements of 1,000 feet for 4 from schools and residential, and then from number 5 from other businesses. Okay.
Consistent, 1,000 from everything.
Yep. Does anyone have any other comments on the sexual-oriented uses and businesses that Eric edited?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Well, aside from the female nipple being differentiated from the male nipple, but that's probably out of our purview. So that's a
yeah.
discussion for another time. That's, equality based.
Where is that?
Where was it? Maybe they specifically refer to the female breast areola, but not the male.
Men can go shirtless.
Yeah, men can go shirtless was probably the rationale behind that. That was existing language, by the way, from
Which, by the way, we'd probably lose on if we went to court on that distinction, but I wasn't going to. I'd rather say, look, it's the old language and leave it alone at that.
exactly.
I agree. I think that's a bigger fight for another day.
And hopefully one we will never have to have, at least while we're employed here.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So if you go to the main chapter, we've now gone through all the sexually oriented businesses part. Now, sorry, I did not number these. But that brings us up to, if I can get my pages turned. (1106.02), which is airports, airfields, and landing strips.
110602.
So it's like
It's about,
page 5 or so.
yeah, about
Page 7. I don't know. My pages are sticking.
section 1106.02, agricultural uses and buildings is
Oh, did I-
stricken.
Okay.
It's stricken, and then it's the one right after that.
And we struck the agricultural uses and buildings because they are permitted uses, so there's no reason to have a condition. For the airport, we just modified the language that was there and took out signs because they're permitted everywhere. And changed the lighting. Any questions? We'll keep going. Does anybody have specific questions, or do you want to go each one by one?
So Jennifer, I have sort of an overarching question, which is there are the A, B, and C pedestrian access, driveway approaches, driveway spacing per intersection seems to repeat on every single one, and it should. I don't disagree. I'm just wondering if there shouldn't just be a general requirements, like these things apply to everything, and then there are additional things, so that if we modify one of those, you only have to modify it once rather than for every single use group. So, I mean, we kept rereading pedestrian access, driveway approaches. I mean, those are just good planning things. Shouldn't that apply to every single one of these categories?
Well, we thought about it, but since we did not have each of those in every single requirement, because there's somewhere one or two of them did not apply, so that's why we decided to just have them repeated throughout as opposed to in every single instance. Because I said, we had a handful of examples where we did not think those conditions were necessary.
In addition, now with the way our code is going to be given to us as basically an electronic updating draft, we would be able to, if we were to take an amendment through, for example, let's say for pedestrian access, at some point we decide that we don't like the word sidewalks and whatever, we want to change it, we would amend it and then reference pedestrian access as referenced throughout the code. And then our new program actually lets us find it and change it, and then it would be listed as being amended and when it was amended. So we do have more technological capabilities now than we did before to make that consistent throughout rather than just doing a word search.
I kind of had I made the same note as Michael's point is, and I said, can't most of this be put in a table or a graph of some sort? And I think that's kind of something what he was saying in a different way. It just seems like the repetitiveness of some of these are, I don't know.
They're repetitive for you because you're reading every one, but for a project, they would go just to their specific section and look only at the conditions for their specific project. So, for example, somebody that's doing an automotive repair would look at that section, but they wouldn't look at all the others and see that that's those same conditions applied. We actually originally thought about doing conditions how we had done them before. If you look at our existing code, it has the conditions listed as a list of 1 through 58. And then within the uses of the specific zoning districts, it then numerically lists, and then you have to flip back. It's very cumbersome to have to look at the chapter, find it's a conditionally permitted use, and then go to chapter 1171 and find those conditions. So with this, they can basically go to the use they're seeking and find the conditions right there for that use.
Okay, the 5 or 6 or 20 conditions are all under each activity. Okay.
So, but I guess I'm gonna disagree politely, because I guess you said that they don't apply to everything. Where do we not want to encourage pedestrian access? Where are loudspeakers and an annoyance okay? I mean, these things seem like they should be standard designs for every parcel in the city.
Say that one.
Well, we don't have it for airports, which is the one we're looking at now, because you don't have a pedestrian from a public sidewalk.
But if we had an airport, I mean, the Stowe has an airport and there's a sidewalk that runs in front of the airport. Why would you not want a sidewalk on the edge of your airport? I guess I'm just wondering why would we not? I think it's different than saying pick and choose these, but there are not 58, but I think there are 4 or 5 things that apply to every site. And if somebody wants to get out of it, they should have to apply for that. Like, I don't understand why the loudspeaker is on some and not others.
One of the things we were trying to do is we're trying to minimize the amount of variance requests. Right now, we are pretty heavy on variance requests. So when a condition is applied for every single use as a condition, but for example, it's just not applicable in the majority of times that use would be applied, they have to seek a variance before they can even go forward with Planning Commission review. So when we looked at this, we looked at it not just from a Planning Commission perspective, but from the BZA perspective, because a lot of times variance requests come before them and they're like, well, why is this here? It's like, well, we have a condition that requires, and so we looked at it from both sides of the fence, I guess is the best way to say it. And so we did literally go through and determine that some of these uses, like driveway approaches, driveway spaces, and pedestrian access is not something we want for airfields and landing strips. That's private use, especially with the amount of green space. The only place it could be is in our OR. So we looked at it from, if we included that, based on where this could even be located, a variance would be needed from this condition. So then we wouldn't include that condition. So we're trying to minimize variance requests as well as helping an applicant go specifically to their use and find their list of what's applied to them in one spot.
I mean, I guess I think that a couple of the people on your committee that are giving you feedback from the outside are saying that this approach, I don't think is the best way. I don't think that 50, I think 58 is too many, but I would also argue that right now, if you left loudspeakers as an annoyance off of one, somebody doesn't need a variance and they can just go put it in, right? Because it wasn't listed. And why would it not be listed? I'm still not trying to understand, like, why would you not want to put a rule on airports that they could have no more than 2 driveways? Why would we not want to say that? Why would we not want them? Because if you don't put it in there, then they have permission to do something that we don't want them to do, correct?
Are you suggesting we should put these under, like, with some of these things under the same statute where we list the requirements for conditionally permitted uses?
I'm not sure. It seems rather inconsistent. If these are sort of the bedrock principles, well, I just don't understand why we're saying it's okay in some locations and not in others. And maybe I'm misunderstanding, but again,
I don't know if they're bedrock principles as more as certain uses are a little more, for lack of a better word, similar than others. So for like example, for an airport, I know when we were looking at this, we were envisioning the OR space off of Fairchild, and the way that we look at it based on what's available there, even though the ground's so wet, nothing could really go there. It would be more of an airfield or a landing strip. So we really aren't going to want, maybe 2 driveway approaches isn't enough because it'd be a private landing strip. They might need one off of this, one after that. I mean, I guess we didn't look at it. We looked at each use and then considered all the conditions that we were applying across to see if we felt that that one was actually a logical one for that use. So with some of them, through our discussions, we did not find that to be the case.
We're talking about an airport. The chances of having an airport in the city of Kent are pretty slim.
No,
exactly. If anything, it would be a landing strip more than anything. If that even happens.
Yeah, but even period. That is, let's pick a different use.
So let's pick a different one. So like the exact wordage for pedestrian access is, the use must be located so as not to interfere with pedestrian use of sidewalks, walkways, or shared use paths. Which projects, Bridget, which use groups do we not want? Where are we going to say it's okay if you interfere with sidewalks, walkways, or shared use paths without a variance?
We can make the
testing and experimental research does not have that one on, because that's something like Davy Tree where there is no sidewalk.
But aren't you, isn't your approach by a specific parcel rather than by a policy? I mean, they don't have it now, but if somebody wanted to do that in a different location, then they're now exempted from it, correct? You're just, am I misunderstanding?
Not exempt from
it. These are the criteria that they have to meet. Now, it still has to come before you as a planning commission, and if it's somewhere that has a sidewalk where we did not anticipate one, then you may add that, right, Eric?
Absolutely.
You can add conditions, because we're looking at it as a generic, if you're going to have a research facility, it's going to be somewhere out on the outskirts, you probably don't have sidewalks. So we didn't think it was necessary to put that one in. But that doesn't mean the planning commission can't add conditions later.
We can put it in.
Or at this point, if you want to put it on all of them, we can
put
put it on all of them.
And I guess I would ask for Amanda, Jeff, or Chris to chime in, because Peter and I have already offered our opinion.
Yeah, and I think you and Peter probably review the zoning code, obviously more, the only time I use it is for planning commission. So for me to look at this section and see everything is, I guess what my thought would be is, if you're not familiar with it, would you know that there's a section that says these conditions apply to all of the following chapters in 1106, or these conditions apply to every section in 1106? If I didn't know that that existed and I'm just going to 110603 automotive repair, I guess I would miss that list of conditions that applies to everything.
Right. I would have to agree with Amanda. I think the biggest concern with that is that if we're switching to that fully digital document and you're able to search things and link things, say the planning department links to one of these sections somewhere else on their site, if the link takes them to that section of the document, without having those items individually listed, they're gonna miss that. And then we're gonna go back and they're gonna say, well, this wasn't laid out appropriately. You linked me to this, I followed this. I feel like it creates a liability for us, because while yes, we can always come back and say, well, it's listed elsewhere in the document, you should have read the entire document. I think they can argue against us saying you broke the rules if we say, well, yes, we linked you to the wrong place, but you should have read the entire zoning code first.
Although with what you're saying, Christopher, at the same time, if every single section said, the conditions in 1106.01A apply, and then you click on the hyperlink, you only have to edit 1106.1A one time. So to Michael's point, I guess if every single section states to go to that section.
And then you link it at the top to the.
Right. None of them would be blank. Every section would say, go see the minimum, right? Go see the minimum. And then if there's one more additional thing or three more additional things that are unique to that one. But, I understand your approach. My fear is always these things is editing, is the future. When the more times you repeat something, the more opportunity there is to miss it at some point. When I was learning how to write specifications, the mantra was you put the information once and only once and in the right place. And you refer people to that right place rather than repeating the information, because while we trust the software to edit it, we've all seen things, people have gone to court over the Oxford comma, right? And lost. And so I just worry about something coming in and out later that, again, if there are, and I don't think there's 58, but I think that there are some of these sections were just identical. It's the same 4 items. And why would we not just meet these bare minimums, and that, or you could do one exception too. If there's only one of those 4 that you don't want to apply to the airport. I mean, that's a building code way that does it too, is they list everything with exceptions. So I've spoken my piece, at the end of the day, Bridget, you and Jennifer and Eric are going to be managing the document. That's my opinion. So I won't belabor the point anymore. And I don't think
I like the idea of having one place to look, like Chris talked about. If we put it directly in the same place where we say that conditionally permitted uses have to be consistent with the neighborhood, if we put it in that section there, that wouldn't bother me so much, because at least we know they're reading that section anyways.
But some of these don't apply to every single one. So we'd have to then identify the exceptions either way. We're going to be, we have to, where we know that they don't make sense, we'd have to list them there as not applying to these uses, or we repeat them in the uses. There's no way to get around not having it one way or the other, because we're not saying these all apply to every single use.
I mean, pedestrian access I get where that applies to most things, but there aren't going to be, other than the pedestrian access, I think we have the driveway limitations that there aren't too many examples. but there might be one or two.
Well, I think we
Harmonious
had,
with the neighborhood.
And as was stated early on in the discussion, an applicant's only going to come look at the section that applies to them. So it's not going to look repetitive or cumbersome to the applicant. As long as we do the editing right and all the information they need is there, I don't think it's going to be an issue the way it's laid out right now.
and that's exactly why we did it this way, because with the listing that we have now, it was multiple locations for an applicant, and they would come in and meet with Jen and Heather, and they would miss something because they were going to multiple locations in the zoning code for requirements. So,
Or they thought everything in 1171 applied.
right. Or they thought all 58 were applicable. So this was, rather than a listing of the conditions and then having them go and find those conditions based on the use in the zoning district, we grouped everything for, so if you're only looking at a gas station, you're only going to look at that section with regards to the conditions. So we organize it by use versus conditions, which is the way we have it now.
Okay, so then let me ask this question, Bridget, so that, because the airport is a bad example. Automobile sales, 1106.04. It does not list, it doesn't list the driveway approaches or the driveway spacing from intersections. Why not?
Let's have driveway approaches.
He's looking at 110604.
Oh, 4. Sorry, I'm on the wrong one.
I think it's because
automotive repair, 11,
it's supposed to.
that's my point, is that we're going to miss them when you list them individually.
Well, you got to remember this is a draft, and we send copies to the consultant, and he definitely I've been working on a list of 5 pages of things that we've missed. So it should be, though. So we need to look at our markup. We have a markup draft. I could go get my markup.
You're going to miss something no matter what. And I think, Peter, if you want to do it individually, then do it in a table so you can quickly look and say, this one should be down every column. Because between 1106, which is automotive repair, 0.03 and 0.04, we've already missed a couple of points. And those are things that are all over the city. And they're important ones. And I mean, are you saying that, Bridget, are you saying that it's in a marked up set that we don't have?
Yeah, I don't think this is the correct copy, Jen, because look at some of this
This
stuff.
is the latest thing that Hunter sent.
Well, this is what the consultant sent us, but I don't think it's what we, let me get my marked up.
Yeah, but we heard this last time with we can't blame the consultants.
I still think that one location, and just say, like, these things apply to everything. And it's the first bullet point, because some of these are in different orders. I don't understand why, like, automobile sales, the first thing is loudspeakers. Then it goes to the driveways, which to me, it seems like you should go with major site planning principles first and work down to the details. Not that that matters a lot, but then other ones, it doesn't have loudspeakers at all. And then you go to the car washing one, and it does have pedestrian access, driveway approaches, driveway spacing. Why you don't have it at the car sales? I kind of like your table one, Peter. If you wanted to have it individually, then a big grid of all these uses, and then.
We don't have it for this one. I don't know why.
And I have a question. Pedestrian access. The use must be located so to not interfere with pedestrian use of sidewalk, walkways, or shared use path. The use of what must not interfere with what?
The conditionally proposed use.
Okay, it says A, pedestrian access. Okay, the use must be so as to not interfere with the pedestrian use of sidewalks, walkways, or shared use paths.
Could you give us an example of what would interfere?
What does that mean?
Firestone parking customers' cars on the Main Street sidewalk blocking that's your example.
And that's brought up, and I redlined that because that's something I want to make sure is covered.
That's it. The pedestrian access covers that. It's just a matter of enforcement at that point.
Well, that says the use must be. That doesn't say you can't park in it.
That means you need to plan your site to be able to have
Parking.
adequate parking for
Yeah.
your customers.
Well, there was something here that I marked up that,
They're storing cars. Firestone stores cars that they're servicing in that spot, so that would be associated with the use.
so why is there, how can they be allowed to still do that in our present zoning code?
They're not, but it's a matter of enforcement.
There was an agreement. They were actually cited numerous times, and there was an agreement that apparently the owner had documented that a prior chief had let them do it. So the agreement is they're only allowed to do one spot, and it's only during business hours, and then it has to be. So there's now like a formalized agreement that removed, like they had 3 cars there, and now I think they can do 1. So that
like
is
a
not
violation.
what we normally allow, but that
So are
was.
you telling me that a police chief can supersede the zoning code?
This was all done way before us, way
So it
before
doesn't
any of
matter
us.
when it was done. If you
Peter,
killed
it does
somebody
matter a
in
little bit.
1980, you still killed somebody. I mean, what?
When the city has a contract with somebody, we can't violate the contract because of the zoning code. If we've got a contract, we've got to live up to our end of the contract, even if we think the contract is bad.
And an earlier version of the zoning code may not have even prohibited or mentioned that topic.
So that
Okay,
would have
never
been
mind.
that would have been safety, and was the person that made the contract even authorized to,
Let's continue. I've got
Have it in our mark?
I got it.
I don't know why we didn't include that in that one.
That's why we're going through it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, well, we can go through then and try to come up with what, but then we'll have to list those where we do exclude it. Like, for example, like the medical marijuana testing labs and stuff like that. Like, we'll have to list an exclusion. I understand the table idea, but the problem is the table would just reference it by like, it wouldn't have maybe the full, I don't know, to get this in a table that would be accessible, it's going to be really large.
I have a real quick question, just so I make sure I'm clear. We want a link to a list of all the conditions that have to be met, and then there will be exclusions for whatever you're applying for, like 110605 is excluded from such and such. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're suggesting?
That's why we were trying to keep it by use. So
Yeah, I think it's much easier to list each one individually within the section you're applying for, rather than having to rest on. Then you have to figure out what you're excluded from. Unless that link takes you to the list of just what you need to hit, but at that point you might as well just put it in the section. But then we're back to having the applicant go through and figure out what they do and don't have to meet the requirements.
Well, that's not what I was proposing, not all
Okay.
of the
I
topics.
may have misunderstood that.
I think I'm saying there's a bare minimum. So I just went over to childcare facilities, 1106.1, and the driveways are there, but the pedestrian one is left off about the circulation. So
Because
apparently, if you're doing a childcare facility, you can interfere with the sidewalk because it's not listed.
well, the child care facility, a lot of them are in residential neighborhoods, and it's a drop off and pickup. So they're not cars parked there. So that we went through each use and tried to play out the scenarios, I guess is the best way to
Bridget,
say it.
I don't think that you're hearing me though. But when you don't say you can't interfere with the sidewalk, that is implied permission
You can't.
to interfere with the sidewalk.
There's already city ordinances in place that don't allow you to block sidewalks, though. This is about
Exactly.
planning
Then
the
why are
site
we
to
listing
block
it
the
at
sidewalk.
all?
Because you can't build your site in a way that obstructs the sidewalk. But there's already
Or have a
laws in place
driver.
to keep you from doing that as a driver and blocking the side. I've gotten a ticket before
Right.
for having my back bumper hanging 3 inches into the sidewalk. There's already a law in place that prohibits that at a given time. We're just talking about making the site so that it can't be built in a way that it blocks the sidewalk. or
So if
limits
I
pedestrian
want to
access.
build a child care facility, I can block the sidewalk?
Obviously,
No.
that needs to be added, but is it blanket? I'm just saying, there's a difference between doing it during business hours, somebody pulling up to a daycare, and building the site that blocks the sidewalk, or in a way that will block the sidewalk intentionally.
Michael's trying to say in general terms, good planning and good design include certain fundamental statements. Period.
I agree.
Doesn't matter what the use is, it doesn't matter where it is.
Is there a list of those statements that we can apply to every section of this? Is there
Michael.
a list that applies to everything? And I don't know.
Besides the sidewalk interference, is there other ones that you believe should be a part of every single one, just for my understanding?
I think if you go to funeral homes, it's A through D. It's pedestrian access, driveway approaches, driveways from intersections, and circulation. That one, those four show up repeatedly. And they should be on every single one,
Okay.
right? I mean, I don't know why you would. So you're not allowed to interfere with the sidewalks on the funeral home, but you are in the daycare.
So
I feel
if
like,
we-
you know, funeral parades block, 50 cars show up at once. Never mind, so.
If we do apply that universally through everything, then when we get the final draft, we have to make sure to triple check that we didn't create a situation where we don't want it applied to something. I agree with you, Michael, that there's probably something that's going to hit 99.9% of these, but we just got to make sure then if we're going to do that, that we find that 1/10 of 1% where it doesn't apply.
But isn't that what the variance process would be for then? Then they would come and say, this doesn't really apply. And then you would say, it's an airport in the open area, blah, blah, blah. You're right. You can do these things.
Right, but they're trying to limit variance requests. So if it is something that is obviously that shouldn't apply in any reason, and the Board of Zoning Appeals denies their variance request for some reason, then they're stuck.
Right.
If it's obvious, so
If it doesn't apply, do they have to go get a variance?
We shouldn't.
if it's in the code, it applies.
You can't sit here on one hand and argue that we need to be making good decisions about good planning, and then on the other hand say, well, let's do this, and if it doesn't apply, they can come get a variance. If it doesn't apply, it shouldn't be in the damn code to begin with.
No. If it doesn't apply to a specific site.
Right,
and
for example,
there's no way to know it now.
driveway spacing from an intersection. If you're on an intersection, the driveways have to be as far away from the intersection as practical. If you aren't at the corner of an intersection, that obviously doesn't apply to you. You don't have to go get a variance. It doesn't apply.
Right.
Right, but
Yeah.
is there going to be an instance where something does require a variance that is obviously is outside of something we saw? They want to build whatever they want to build. Now they got to get this variance that is an obvious, misstep in our part because it should have never applied there in the first place. The BZA says no, and all of a sudden they're stuck. So, and I understand totally what you're saying, Michael, that there probably is a great majority of these that we can just apply everything to, but I think we need to be very, very careful about that. And again, it's not going to be as cumbersome to the applicant because they're just going to look at their one section. It's going to look very cumbersome to us because we're seeing the same thing over and over and over again. And we just need to make sure that we just have to be really careful universally applying everything.
Right. And I agree that it will be less cumbersome for the people that go to their section. But we've been here for not very long, and I've already found major things that are missing from certain ones that should be there. And my concern is not for them. My concern is that we miss something because you're trying to repeat the same 5 things over, 25 categories, and you miss it when you want it.
Which is why we're reviewing it now, and we're going to review it when it's finished, and it's going to get reviewed by the consultant and our staff and city council before it's approved.
City
So
council's not going to review this.
So, all right. So Eric, I said those 4, and then I guess I would ask you to consider the loudspeakers, because noise ordinance comes up all the time, and we can't predict who's going to want one for their property and who's not,
Okay.
right? And I know we have a noise ordinance. So that would be that A through D, and then loudspeakers. But so.
All right. Well,
you're on A through D on funeral homes.
let's look at this. We'll see what we can do with this, see how much of that we can incorporate and move on to some other topics, but let's see what we can do with this.
really.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we'll be done.
I need to revisit it all. So, we probably shouldn't go further.
Well, we can go see it. We can go through this and see what else would they think is missing or should.
Other than
apply.
those, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to airports, is there anything missing that you think should be applied, or is there anything you want to delete?
No, that's good.
You know what's missing
Okay.
is the potential of an airport ever opening in the city of Chester.
Right.
Well, yes, that is missing. I agree.
Let's get to the next one, please.
Automotive repair. Anything missing, or you want to, or needs to be stricken?
I have a question about rental equipment. Trailers, trucks, other automotive equipment, I'm assuming that's, and this is just for my clarification, is the property of the business owner, correct? Not customer service things, it's their property.
I would assume it's by whoever owns the property is renting something out.
Okay, because it said stored on or rented from. So like if they have a trailer that they store tires in at their tire shop, that trailer has to be located behind the building, but not if I take my trailer to be serviced somewhere and it's just going to be a temporary fixture there. It can be stored on their lot and taken out when I'm done with it. So it's not considered storage at that point.
That's a
Like, if
good
you look at-
question. I think we
Yeah, if
thought
you
of
look at
it.
Main Street Auto, they have cars wrap in the entire perimeter of their building, but they don't own all that equipment. So, but they are stored there for the duration of the time they're being repaired. Because I know that the city was ticketing and defined storage as over 24 hours on the street or wherever.
Is that considered parking or storage?
I think after 24 hours is considered storage according to
Okay.
the,
We'll look
On
at the
private
parking
property?
code. We'll have to look at the parking code and see their requirements, and then maybe we might have to add a sentence to this. This is existing language from the code, it's black. So that was from the old code, so we'll look at the parking code and see if we can update that.
yeah, and
I
that's
see
how
what you're
I
saying, Jeff.
understood
I'm
it.
gonna look
Yeah,
at it more.
I do too, I see what you're saying too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, but how do you, okay, it says must be stored behind front building lines. What
There's a
is the
grammar
front
thing there.
building line? Is that the line of the front of the building? And then how do you, the U-Haul out on West Main on, they have two fronts. And all those trailers are stored right on, it's not Silver Meadows Boulevard, but whatever, Spalding Drive.
Do we have a definition for front property line? Is it like the street that the building's address faces, or?
It's front building line.
I'm sure we've gone over that, but it was probably a long time ago.
Jen's looking it up.
It's under building.
But I mean, that property has
My
two
God.
fronts.
For me personally, because that's a Main Street address, I would consider their front building line the side that faces Main Street.
But that's not what the zoning code says. The zoning code says on that property, you have two front yards.
Right, and they store on both those front yards.
That's what I just said, yeah.
I know, I'm agreeing with you. So what's,
Okay. So I'm
Right.
saying this doesn't answer a question, doesn't answer the question. Let's not put something in there has no meaning,
and again,
or it's
Have
gonna
we even-
prohibit people from doing business
That's
in the city.
an alternate wording.
is there a rental, why is rental equipment even listed in automotive repair major and minor? Where's the rental section? That should be a different kind of business.
Talk about setback lines, but not buildings.
I didn't even know if 1106.03D should even be listed there.
Well, I suppose it's not uncommon for some places to have, some repair shops to have like one or two Hertz or U-Haul trucks to be a distributor dealer of those. I mean, I don't know if we have any now, but
Even the bowling alley does Penske truck rental.
yeah, you're right.
Bowling alley has truck
They
rentals,
got permission too.
Yeah.
and they're not stored
We should
behind the
look at that.
building
It's an
front
old
line.
phrase. It's an old phrase, so let's look at. This is from the old code, so we're gonna look at it. We'll look at that
Okay.
one. You have that marked on our list, Eric?
I'm putting it down.
Eric's has a list.
But this could also be construed, if I read this correctly, enterprise rental. It says a rental car business. I mean, that would prohibit enterprise from putting cars in the front of the building.
This is automotive repair. It's not automotive rental. That's covered under another section.
Okay,
Right.
just I can't remember all these sections because there's too much cross out for me to understand what's going on.
Yep.
When are we gonna get a full finished version or semi-finished version that we can read?
After we complete this section, we're sending it back to the,
We're gonna have to come back with them. We're gonna make
Yeah.
substantive changes to this, so we'll have to come back to them.
This isn't gonna be the last. I knew that was.
Peter, it might be the last time you see it.
Could be.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be good for all you guys? How could I go through this for 27 years and not be here at the end? That doesn't make sense.
We'll try to get the public hearings in December then, so you can be here.
That's
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
I could still go to the public hearings and bitch. That's all right. I'll come as a citizen. What the
All right, so we'll look at that one. We're
Yeah,
only still
we'll
at
look at
A.
the rental
so we've
equipment.
got-
I can't actually think of somebody who rents equipment, so. How about automotive, mobile home, trailer, and farm implement sales?
Why don't we ask if
So, Michael, you said earlier, maybe we need the pedestrian access, driveway approaches, and driveway spacing for this one also?
Why not?
you're on mute, Michael.
Sorry about that. Thank you. I agreed, and I agree with Peter. And I think that the order of them should be consistent if we're going to have these same five. Like, to me, the sort of major site planning issues are just more important than loudspeakers. It just surprised me that the list opened with loudspeakers. But yes,
That's because that's where it was before, but we can rearrange them.
Right,
That's
that's
not a
how it was in
problem.
the existing one.
Yeah.
Anything in black is from the existing code.
Anything else anybody wants to strike or add?
No.
Okay, how about automotive washing facility? Okay, hearing none, banks and financial institutes. With driveways or drive-throughs or without drive-throughs?
Okay.
How do loudspeakers apply there? If you have like, I guess it wouldn't be considered a loudspeaker. It's like a P, you know, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is when you're communicating with the teller at the drive-thru. Is that considered a loudspeaker?
I wouldn't consider it a loudspeaker, but maybe I'm
More
wrong.
like an order board.
Yeah, it's usually kept low because you're dealing with a separate individual customer.
Okay.
Are you thinking that's a problem and we should have a condition for that?
No, I just didn't know if that was considered a loudspeaker or not.
Oh, I
Now,
don't consider it a loudspeaker. Even like an order board at a restaurant, that's an order board. It's not a loudspeaker. The
Loudspeakers-
loudspeakers are like at the car places.
Right.
Jim, you got to call on line 2.
right, where they call across the whole dealership area. So it's not like an order board is what you'd normally see at like Taco Bell. Like, you know,
Do we
where
have
they're,
that defined somewhere? Do we need to define it?
and yeah, I agree with you, Jeff. And should we add? Like we automatically default to sort of fast food restaurants, but maybe we should think about, are those ever a nuisance at a bank, at a pharmacy, other drive-throughs? You know, should it just be?
I don't
drive-through?
think so. I don't think they are at all, but I don't know that if we have them delineated from what a loudspeaker is to what like an order board like that is, like where is that, you know, is Don Joseph able to say, hey, we don't have a loudspeaker, we just have this, you know, we can communicate with our customer, whoever it is. Like, is there a gray area there we need to worry about? I don't really think there is, but I'm not the lawyer.
nowadays they use the cell phones mostly. So okay.
I'm looking up the Webster's definition right now. an apparatus that converts electrical impulses into sound, typically as part of a public address system or stereo equipment.
Yeah, like a public address where it's like across the whole property, like where you
Okay.
hear it loud.
Like the football announcements.
Right. That's a loudspeaker.
Good enough for me.
I have one question on D then. Vehicular approaches, well, no, that's vehicular, never mind. On drive-throughs in general. And, you know, banks, I'm not sure what direction they're going now, but it seems to me drive-throughs, I don't even know if we have anything that regulates how drive-throughs, but over the last 2 years, some of our biggest problems and concerns have been drive-throughs for coffee shops.
Yep.
And, you know, the Dunkin' Donuts one, which I didn't realize, but Jeff brought it up at one of the meetings. I just happened to go to the Dunkin' Donuts on East Main Street after the Dunkin' Donuts meeting one Saturday morning at 8:30. It was a Saturday. I couldn't believe the cars were backed up out onto University Drive.
Peter, it's
If you
like
look
that.
at the new D, look at circulation under D for banks. We also have this for restaurants with a drive-through. It now requires that they have to be designed to allow sufficient off-street transient parking or waiting area without creating interference with traffic on the
And
street.
I read that and I put something next to it was, that's to me, for certain items or certain uses, that probably works. But for the Dunkin' Donuts and maybe even for the Starbucks, I think they have to be more stringent. I think you have to have specific requirements.
So if you back the traffic up in the street, it's your job to get it out of there, or else we're fining you, because that
But
Dunkin'
no,
Donuts
but not,
traffic.
no, that's not true.
Because we're obviously we.
No, that's the wrong way to go about it. The dirty deed has already been done. We've half of the time the zoning code doesn't give us the tools to say, no, you can't do this.
That's why we added this. We didn't have it before.
This still doesn't do it, however, because Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks has to prove that they are not going to do that to traffic. And the reality is the Dunkin' Donuts on East Main Street, they needed umpteen variances. So that shows you right off the bat that building didn't fit on that site.
That waiting area would be.
If I recall correctly, we asked those questions and we said, there's no way this is ever going to work. And people told us we were wrong. And here we are.
And I got voted down.
But Chris, my point is the reason that they told us we were wrong is because we didn't have something in the zoning code that says no.
No, that's
Just to
not why you
clarify,
did it.
Starbucks has not had traffic from the drive-through interfere with on the street. Dunkin' Donuts, yes, but we have not had.
No, that is factually, no, that is not true. When they did their pumpkin spice launch, what was it, a month and a half ago? It was backed out in 3 different directions.
Agreed.
They absolutely had.
I live 2 blocks from Starbucks and 2
So do
blocks
I.
from Dunkin', and it's every single day from 7 a.m. till about 3:30.
Okay, then let's talk about the language you want added to what we wrote to ensure that doesn't happen. What would you ask to be included on circulation?
I don't think we can do that today. This is something that has to be researched, and I mean, you have to, and not only that, but on that Starbucks site, there's two issues. One, interfering with street traffic, and 2, interfering with the circulation within the site. And I'm sure that gets screwed up on the Starbucks site all the time and on that Dunkin' Donuts site, just like the one that we approved, God bless me, out there on 43.
Which is going to be
261.
Right.
When that backs up out onto 43, it's going to be a little bit different than backing up out to University Drive. And the Dunkin' Donuts on my side of town, which is in Stowe, That parking lot's a mess in the morning.
Well, the Starbucks
Luckily-
and the Dunkin' Donuts were permitted uses. For the Dunkin' Donuts on 43 and 261, that was conditionally permitted. So
But permitted uses still have to meet certain, all I'm saying is,
I understand, but
drive-
we're talking different, like, we couldn't, even under a permitted use, we can still have a criteria that they meet on site.
and that's all I'm trying to say, before you pass this zoning code.
Yeah, be a
Make
little more
sure-
intentional about what their requirements are going to be when it comes to traffic overflow and
Right.
maintaining safety.
I mean.
So
we-
what do you suggest we add for this circulation to add also on site, or?
I don't think we're in a position,
Intent is
we don't know
on
the business
site.
well enough to know what to add
I
there.
think we need our consultant to give us some options from some other cities and
Yes.
say, here's some cities who have dealt with similar issues and how they've addressed it, because I don't think we're in a position where we are able to make an educated and informed decision at this moment, but it is something that's important moving forward.
It's just taking issues that we've had over the last 3 or 4 years, and we have nothing to fight it with. Give the zoning code and the planning commission the tools to be able to say, this doesn't work. Come back with a better idea.
Can I make a suggestion as a stopgap for that? Could we say that circulation, you have to design the property with enough queue room in your drive-through equal to the amount of capacity of your indoor seating area. So if that's 47 people at Dunkin' Donuts, they have to be able to fit 47 cars in their drive-through line, which is totally ridiculous. But then they can apply and try to get variances from that
Well,
point
let's,
down.
we're not.
Let's go too far
qualified to
one
make
way.
Those kind of zoning, we can make suggestions as to how it should go. But
I don't know
somebody-
the math on it, but I'm just saying if we go with a ridiculously high number like that, and Starbucks comes and says, well, even at a peak hour, we only expect to have 20 cars in there, we'll say, okay, well, we still want you to have room for 30, or whatever the case may be. Because obviously having a space for 7 or 8 cars in Dunkin' Donuts drive-through line isn't enough. And there's indoor capacity, I believe, is in the 40s. There's got to be research that can be done, but I don't know if in the meantime, we can put something in place that makes it really outlandish, and then they can come in with the numbers to prove that we're wrong and ask for the variance.
Jeff, I like your creative thinking on that. I have a little bit of concern. First of all, my first concern, and again, I still like the fact you're thinking outside the box, but I imagine they're not going to tell us how many people they really expect to be standing in their drive-through line, because their number will always be less than the amount of space they have in their on-site.
Mhm.
So I don't trust that we'll get valid information from them about that.
And there's not one size fits all, depending on the product and how much the drive-through use.
And doing that as a BZA variance, I picture that having a difficult time anybody ever getting a variance from that based upon the criteria we have for variances. But I like the way you're thinking about it. I'm trying to think if there's some way we can work with that.
Well, all these restaurants have data on how many cars they serve per hour and all that.
Oh, yes, I just don't expect them to actually share the honest data with us. I guess what I'm saying. I'm a little more cynical than you are, perhaps.
They always come
Right.
before us in planning commission and say, we're gonna have this many cars per hour, per minute, blah, 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 and it's gonna be
Right.
fine. So, I mean, that's always what they say. So what do we do? Because if we deny it and they go to court and they show the judges that, we typically don't get the judgment in our favor.
Right, but it's to the point now where through some of these, it's a safety issue on University because the street's blocked in both directions. So is 59. So you're creating a safety issue where the fire truck can't get through. So we have to figure out some sort of language where this doesn't happen again. There's nothing we can do about what already happened, but we need to stop it from happening again because obviously those are profitable businesses, and I won't be surprised if we get 2 or 3 more applications in the next year.
We'll look at the language, but right now we're only on item B, and the meeting's been going an hour and 10 minutes, so we need to move forward. We will look at that, though, and find language, and we'll talk to the consultant, and we'll bring something back for circulation, for banks as well as for restaurants.
Can you
Last
Eric,
point
are
on
you
that.
able to look at case law to see like any cases that had circulation as part of?
Sorry about that. I'll look for a case law about circulation for site plan review.
Yeah.
My last comment on that is I think the Starbucks in Solon had a very similar issue, and the city safety people are dealing with it one way or another. When we had the discussion about the Starbucks over here, it was talked about. So maybe you could look into that too.
Can we also, if we're going to send this to consultant and ask him for feedback, can we get multiple examples? Can we not just have him write us, instead of just writing us, here's your solution? I want to see multiple examples of what other cities have done, because this is one of those issues that I want to make sure that we get right. And it's probably not going to match 100% what somebody else did, but we could probably use different pieces from different solutions. At least
We'll probably have to do that research because the consultants, some of the issues that are issues for us in our community, he has not experienced with other communities, that other communities have their own other separate zoning issues. So we'll ask, but he may not have multiple examples. So we'll look them up and find some.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, bed and breakfast. Does anybody have anything specific that they want to go to, or do you want to keep going one by one? Because
On this particular one, I just wanted to ask, the parking, I guess I questioned whether or not it seemed excessive when it was per bedroom versus guest unit, because if you had like a 2-bedroom suite, if you had like a family with 2 kids, I mean, I didn't think we did a 1-for-1 for bedroom, but so I just wanted to check that out to make sure that everybody was in agreement with that.
They have 1 or more bedrooms occupied by the same family or group. So I think we should be good. Are we assuming that they're coming in the same car, I guess? Is that what you're asking?
My question is whether we are requiring more parking than is necessary, and then we end up with more asphalt than we want. Most people go to bed and breakfast as couples or families. And
Well,
so if it's okay, then I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding it correctly.
What was the theory in changing it from guest unit to bedroom?
bedroom was
Maybe.
just more clear about what it was.
Because a bed and breakfast is basically a single family structure where the owner lives there. And so typically they're renting out just bedrooms. So when we were talking to the consultant, we asked him to get us some language. Most of what he provided referenced the bedroom versus a guest unit in a bed and breakfast. Again, this is just a bed and breakfast.
I guess
Okay.
it's just, to me, it's a little confusing because right above it is maximum number of guest units. And then the next one talks about bedrooms instead.
That upper one is our old language. I think maybe we just need to change that to say bedroom.
Yeah.
Because when we were
Regarding-
talking about it, we were talking about no more than 4 guest bedrooms because, in a bed and breakfast, the owner lives there and they usually will have an area where they might have their, a room for the parents and a room for a child or a guest. That's their private quarters, I guess, so to speak. And then they could lease up to the 4 bedrooms as bed and breakfast. So I think our intent was to make that bedrooms. You guys, you think?
Yeah, I think we just missed that.
Yeah.
And where are these permitted at?
R4, C, they're not allowed in the R1, R2, or R3. I think it's R4. Wait, she's looking on the table.
And where do these parking places have to be?
I feel like they probably have to fit within whatever the
No,
Yes,
it's
where they're
not,
at, don't
unless
they?
it's specified somewhere else.
wouldn't it be specified depending on what district they're in?
Well, in our parking code, we don't allow front yard parking. So they wouldn't be allowed in the front if that's what you're anticipating. They would have to be
Well,
in
I
the
mean,
back.
do they have to be on the site? Does it say somewhere in relation to this where the parking has to be?
Well, a parking plan would be the only one that would allow it off-site. Planning commission could approve if they found it like
Parking always has to be on site unless it's in the CD district. Jennifer found the code, it's permitted or conditionally permitted. R2, R3, R4, RC, CR, ICR, C, CD, NC, and U.
So it's basically almost everywhere except R1.
NOR,
Yeah,
IR,
whatever, but, okay.
yeah.
So yeah,
They have to adhere to the overline parking regulations in whatever district it's in, correct?
Correct. But
Okay.
you're right. If it's in the CD, that definitely allows them to have off-site parking.
Right. I had a question about maximum guest stay. I like the no more for a period of 7 consecutive days. The 14 total days, I threw a scenario in my head, like what if, my daughter's going to college at Kent State and I'm going to come up for a weekend a month and stay for a week here or a week there, I feel like that could get cumbersome, but maybe put a cap on it for days in a month.
The reason we did this is because we actually have a similar criteria for guest for our single family rentals, because oftentimes boyfriends and girlfriends stay over at a house, and once they exceed 14 days, we consider them a tenant, and then there's a zoning code violation. So in other
14
words,
days
there's
in
a lot of
in a
illegal,
year?
14, it's basically, we try to limit it. You wouldn't believe the number of, actually landlords encouraged us to establish a definition for guests, because
Sure, I can
their
understand that.
tenant would have a boyfriend there nonstop, and they didn't want him
Okay.
there. So,
Good for me.
but I will double check. I'll put a note to verify it matches what we use for the other categories, just so we make sure it's the same.
Yeah, I thought
The
it
wording,
gave.
I mean,
I thought it was within a month period, not a year period. Maybe that was something else I was thinking of. So could be wrong.
actually, I
Probably.
think in the other part of our code, it's 14 consecutive days or 30 days in a given calendar year is I think how it's supposed to be written.
Okay.
Is it, Eric? I think that's how we change. Well, I'll verify it and make it match.
Thank you.
Okay. Cemetery,
Nothing.
child daycare facilities,
I don't have anything.
crematory,
Nothing.
extractive uses. What we just gonna
Okay.
refer to?
Yeah, we're referring to the Ohio Revised Code for the extractive uses, because a lot of this specificity, they've rewritten a lot of the laws since this was put into the original code. So the wording references the section of the Ohio Revised Code. I believe it's Ohio Revised Code 1215 for extractive uses, and then it lists those mineral extractive uses. So we're using that in the definition. We're going to be having the zoning code consultant include what is under what those minerals are, because extractive uses are different than like oil and gas wells.
So basically, this whole section will go away. Not the whole thing, but it'll just have the Ohio Revised Code.
As amended, so that way then if the ODNR updates or changes the Ohio Revised Code with regards to extractive uses, the state's requirements would apply as they're changed.
Okay. Any other questions on that?
No.
We took family care home out. That goes under a different category now. For fraternal societies,
Replaces
Which is-
clubhouses.
replaces clubhouses, so that's like Boy Scouts and,
The IRS has a definition for fraternal societies, so we're going to use that because we've had instances where an informal group would call themselves a clubhouse under this category, including the gentleman that tried to turn the VFW into the restaurant facility. So rather than us defining clubhouses, we went to the IRS and they call them fraternal societies. And if you meet that definition, then you would be considered a fraternal organization.
Good enough.
funeral homes,
Nope.
gas stations,
Nope.
residential facilities. So a bunch of items got grouped under residential facilities, like the one I just mentioned that we took out.
Some of the terminology is actually not used anymore or is considered offensive. So we tried to use a more generalized category and include all those other ones underneath that. Like we had group homes separate for like abused child versus, you know, a residential facility services all kinds of populations. We don't need to list each population, so to speak. We definitely don't need to list the juvenile offenders.
Home occupation, it says
Nothing.
limited home business off because that's a permitted use. Somebody yell if you have any questions, otherwise I'm gonna keep going.
Well, I have to leave in a few minutes. I have one question, and it's a little
Okay.
further down, and then that's really, then I'll let you guys go. But under section 1106, or 1106, multifamily dwellings, it's about 6 or 8 pages down the road. It's multifamily dwellings and apartments. And on the second full page, it has existing text. One of them is letter E, development standards.
110628.
1106.28, yeah.
Which one, Peter?
Well, it's the one in the black. It says development standards. Is it my understanding that this stays in?
Unless you want to take it out.
Well, no, okay, that's a question. But it says must meet the following criteria.
Which isn't listed.
Yeah, we were working with the zoning consultant to get some of that. We don't have all that. We do have
Fine,
a.
that's fine. I want to go to the next question then, if we don't have it. It says architectural design. It says the architectural design of apartment buildings must be developed with consideration given to the relationship of adjacent development in terms of building height, mass, texture, lines, pattern, character. So I don't know what that means. And how does architectural design fit into our zoning code? Only because,
I wanted to
for
remove it.
example,
I wanted to remove this, but Eric argued to keep it, so I'm going to let him explain why we're
well,
keeping
wait,
it.
but my point is this.
Tell us why you're wrong, Eric.
The point is this. When the first building came onto Franklin Avenue and wanted it to be 6 stories high, that was an apartment building, in essence. Okay, so, but as everyone knew, the zoning code says you can go 60 feet high, so there was no way to say you couldn't do that. But in here, it specifically says, giving, consideration, whatever that means, to the relationship of adjacent development. And all the people who argued against the 6 stories, this never came up.
So my answer to you, Peter, is that I wanted to keep that in there for exactly so that somebody could raise that argument. But if you as an architect don't know what that even means, then I would say I'm wrong for doing so. But I left it in trying to give people tools to
Well, I know
argue.
what it means, but the argument is there. How do you argue it when part of the code says you can go 6 stories, and then this says you're supposed to be sympathetic to the surrounding architectural styles and mass?
Well, and
height?
also under the conditions, they have to look at if it's harmonious with the neighborhood, is what I said to Eric. So that's where planning commission can really make that determination.
Right.
So we didn't really need this separate one.
But that's not the point. How do you argue 2 opposites? I can argue any which way you want, but when you get to the court, it's like this saying, one of the requirements is you have to be sympathetic to the building heights. But the other requirement says you can go 60 feet high, and there isn't a 60-foot high building in the area.
Which means you'll never have a 60-foot high building.
We have 2 of them now.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. If that's the case,
And
then
now we can have a bunch more.
everything else, it's putting a burden on the developer to say, well, I appreciate what you want to do, but we're not going to let you go this big.
Country Street.
The next 6 buildings.
Hey,
We,
I've raised my hand. I'm willing to drop it out and take it back out. I mean, Bridget told me I was wrong in the first place, and obviously you guys agree with her, and I'm good with that.
We're gonna strike it.
well, okay.
In
I'm not
Chris's
sure
words,
that's
yes,
what I
tell you I'm
wanted,
wrong.
but I'm just bringing it up as far as how is architectural design come in when we have no teeth for it again.
Right. The best place for it to be is addressed when if it's harmonious in to the neighborhood when you're dealing with the 6 general standards for conditionally permitted uses, which are still staying the same.
You anticipate the argument exactly right.
Okay.
And we did come up with which we'll be bringing back to you, a definition for apartment, because we actually don't have one now. But we know we needed one to allow for, basically the apartment is conditionally permitted. We're going to assign it to the R4 and the U district only. So this would allow for up to 4 unrelated persons in a single residential unit, which is basically what you have at like, a University Edge and some of the places like that. The difference is it's actually going to be conditionally permitted where some of the ones that went in were permitted, and it's limiting it to the U and the R4 only. So that definition will be bringing to you along with some other updates in a separate sheet.
Well, thank you, and I have to go. Good night.
Good night.
Bye, Peter.
If I can fit-
I have a
So
question.
does anybody have any specific questions on different ones or things they want to add or take out as opposed to us going sheet?
I have a
Thank
question
you.
with 110630. On page, I want to say 51. It's just about the hours of operation for farmers markets and why we chose the 6 to 6.
That was existing code, but if you want to change that, we could. This would be the time. Do any of them open at 6 a.m.?
I've never seen it
Setup.
open at 6 a.m.
Yeah, they're not, I think that includes setup too for the
Yeah, they're
vendors.
probably setting up those hours.
Right.
Yeah.
I would, if it's for setup, I would say 6 to 8 because I could see a farmer's market going later in the afternoon if they didn't need to cut off earlier to break down.
So 6 a.m. to 8 p.m.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Works for me.
Let's see. I just confused all my pages. I had just a question on, it was in the medical marijuana section. 1106, where are we?
22 is where medical marijuana starts.
Um,
The first one is cultivator.
yeah, the 0622. Why did we take out the section where the truck routes had to be covered by that $25,000 bond? Or did it get moved somewhere?
We have found that with almost all the bonds that are required, it is very cumbersome for staff because it's in perpetuity.
I don't even see where that is.
It was in the circulation in section C.
Oh, I see it.
And I was trying to remember what we had a long conversation specifically to put that in there. And I don't remember, honestly. So I was just curious why we ended up then taking it out.
Just the difficulty of actually enforcing any of the bonds and is the only reason why we took it out.
Okay.
I can skip up to 110644 if nobody has anything else before then.
1106, I'm sorry, 44?
44, but if somebody has something, that's pretty far down the road. If somebody has something before that, do it to it.
I got something in 46, so I'm after you.
Okay.
Yeah, I gotta find 44.
So that's page 63. But that's the old 44.
storage units.
The original 44 or the new 44?
New 44. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, hang on.
Restaurants or?
No, storage. I'm sorry.
That's the new one.
At
40.
11:06:38 though, before we get there, for the loudspeakers, being that that one was taken out, but that's an outdoor recreational facility which might have loudspeakers. Do we need that in there?
We can put that back in. That's no problem. We'll put it back
Yeah.
in.
I'm just thinking of like a fun and stuff, or I don't know, some kind of outdoor recreational that might be loud and annoying, or even a public swimming pool.
That might be loud and annoying.
Yeah.
Okay.
We got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay,
storage.
storage units.
Okay, you had something on storage units?
Yeah, we struck contractors' equipment storage yard or plant or storage and rental of equipment commonly used by contractors. So is this just storage units or is this storage yards as well?
It's units,
Units.
Okay, so a storage yard does not apply to what's here.
correct.
Okay,
This would
Then I'm
be
good.
places that they have to keep it enclosed.
all right. Okay, that cleared that up for me.
Christopher, what number were you?
I wasn't, but Michael had, I believe.
On 46, my question is pretty broad. It just says tool and equipment rental. And my comment really is, isn't there more to say? This seems to be sort of a lack of requirements. If we're looking at a big equipment yard, about how close it can be to things. Like, I guess this is like whatever, cranes and dump trucks and other things like that.
Yeah.
And does it need to be behind a fence? It just seemed like some of the other categories that might have been a similar situation had more restrictions put on them. And
Well, what are
that's
the
what it's-
districts that it's allowed in though? And what are the
Okay.
requirements in that district? I think we have to look at. Which I don't know. off
We
the top
can
of my
look
head.
at that, though. Jen's looking at it and see it, but we can add that.
Yeah, again, it was
Basically,
just,
issues for outside storage.
Conditionally permitted in the ICR and the C.
Was that tool rental or outside storage?
Tool and equipment rental.
Okay.
And that would be
ICR.
another, that would be another one
Permitted in
when
the
I would want to question loudspeakers again. In a big place like that.
I wouldn't think you would need them in that because you have a central office where a customer's going into an office, signing a rental agreement, going out, getting the piece of equipment. I don't think it'd be as necessary there. I rent that kind of stuff, so I haven't seen a use for it yet, and I don't see why it would be. Unless you were paging somebody that needed to bring equipment up, but I'm not 100% sure it'd be totally necessary there.
Right, but what if they did? Like I have Claben behind me. I hear their loudspeakers all day long and all night long. It drives me
Yeah.
insane. So if
I'm-
somebody else lives
can
by a
imagine.
rental yard and they're paging people to bring equipment,
We can put it in there.
It wouldn't hurt, and if they don't have a loudspeaker, it doesn't apply.
But we'll also look at fencing and some criteria too with like screening
okay.
and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, there
I
was
know-
quite a bit of stuff for like a junkyard, scrapyard.
Storage
Not that
yards
it's that
require
bad,
screening.
but it seems like we want to have something if we can.
Okay, we'll beef that one up.
Okay.
And I don't know if we can do this, but like, I feel like in the I district, it's probably less important than maybe the C district, right? Because if you're next to some other commercial properties, it's got a different character of the city that you're trying to preserve also for those other landowners.
But again, if
It's
you look at
permitted.
Carter Lumber as an example, it's
Oh,
right
yeah.
next to multiple residential districts.
It's permitted in the I.
These don't apply if it's in the I district because it's a permitted use there.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you.
You welcome. Anything else?
That was the last thing on my list.
We will try to, we'll meet, we gotta find out when Eric's available, and we will go through redoing the format of this to see if we can pull out commonalities and still, maybe we can try to hyperlink it. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Does anybody have any questions about the additional ones that were added in a separate packet? These were ones that were in our chart but did not end up in our 1106 from the consultant yet, because we haven't given that him.
I did. I put a question mark behind dorms. Do we have a definition of dorm?
Do you have a definition of one?
Yes, we did. Unless we deleted it, we definitely had one before.
And most universities gotten away from calling dorms dorms, and now they all refer to them as residence halls.
But even then, the university isn't necessarily
No,
bound
we were
by
gonna
these.
add a definition for dorm. We were gonna
Okay.
add a definition. I don't think we have it. It's
And
on my
then-
notes. We have to add a definition.
Okay, and my other comment on those ones was, it says frat/sorority houses, probably should say fraternity/sorority.
Yeah,
And I just didn't-
Heather just was abbreviating, but we definitely would use the formalized name.
And I didn't
Yeah.
know if there's a larger umbrella term that you want to use for that, but that would really be up to you. You know, so those were the only comments I had on the additional ones.
feel like we
I just
called
have a
it
question
Greek
about
housing.
the process in a whole.
Right.
I think we
So
called
what
it Greek housing. I don't think we actually used, we'll check that. Heather was doing this just so we knew which ones were not in the conditions yet, but that had been listed in the table, so we made sure that they would be added. So this is kind of like our working list. But I know that, I think we talked about Greek organizational housing or something like that.
So are you
So
gonna
we'll check.
Are you going to limit the fraternity and sorority housing to university affiliated? Because there's been in the last 5 years, there's been a large number of expanding fraternal organizations that are community-based and not necessarily university-based. So do you want to limit this to fraternity and sorority Greek houses? And
That's
Or-
what I was wondering, Chris, is if it should be something more like, it's sort of a social organization housing.
Right.
You know, if there's a more generic umbrella term, so that we don't
Okay.
get caught where something is not excluded. And maybe you put fraternity, sorority, and other affiliated group housing or something like that, or
So-
community-based
I gotta go.
housing.
Just hit on this. You guys just hit this end key.
Got it.
Okay. But the dog is gonna,
No, you gotta
I
go.
gotta go.
So fraternity, we've got defined as an organization officially associated with and recognized and supervised by an institution for higher education. So I think that it's necessarily has to be associated with the university or recognized by the university, Chris, to answer your question.
all right, well, we'll definitely want to
I put in my notes, we're gonna work on that one too.
qualify.
I have a question about the scope of this entire project we've been doing, the whole zoning code. So we've made these changes over the last, I don't know how many years or months, incrementally
So,
over time.
It's
So
over a
we're
year.
gonna get, a finished copy, basically.
God, we
at some
hope so.
point. Yes. Are we gonna sit down then and say, okay, let's see how these decisions we made back in April impacted the decisions we made in October? And all right, we're gonna have this discussion and go back and what do we need to tweak here to make it all work together? Like, is that gonna be a discussion that's gonna happen at some
So
time?
to answer your question, we have to have a public hearing in which the entire public is invited to attend, just like we're
Okay.
doing now. But we have to do that with the whole kit and caboodle.
The whole document?
The only thing we were debating is if we're going to do it in two meetings, one for the first half, one for the second half, versus doing it for the entire thing all at once.
Please do
Okay.
it in 2 meetings. Please.
Because in retrospect, thinking back about things we've done before, there's like things I might want to propose to the group that we change. So I guess that'd be the time that'd be appropriate to do that.
No, and Jeff, I agree with you because you're right. As we've made one change, things that made sense in February have made less sense in August. I agree with you about that. And that's part of why we wanted to bring it all back in one document. Then we looked at it and said, wow, that's just so overwhelming. That's why we thought about doing it, is breaking it at least into half.
Sounds good to me. Should be a fun one.
I appreciate your optimism.
Okay, any other questions?
Do we need to approve some minutes?
What was that?
Do we have minutes on this agenda? I'm sorry, I don't have the agenda in front of me.
We do not. Oh, yes, we do.
Yeah, we do. Okay.
We do?
Oh, but I
Yeah.
didn't get them. Yeah, I don't have
Oh,
them.
maybe
I don't think
Oh,
I
we
have
can do it.
minutes.
we can do it the minutes of the next meeting.
Okay.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 4-0.
Thank y'all.
Thank
All
you.
right,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Right.
Bye.